June 1944. Normandy hedgerows. A German machine gun nest has pinned down an American patrol. The Wehrmacht soldiers confidently work their bolt-action Kar 98K rifles, 5 rounds, then manually chamber the next cartridge. Click, pull, aim, fire. Click, pull, aim, fire. This rhythm had dominated European battlefields since 1898. Then something changed. The Americans didn't stop firing. 8 rounds poured downrange without pause, the distinctive metallic ping of ejecting clips echoing across the field. The German squad leader realized with growing dread that every single American rifleman was firing as fast as a light machine gun. Within minutes, the German position was overrun. Not by superior numbers, not by better tactics, but by a technological gulf so vast that 46 years of German military doctrine became obsolete in a single firefight. This is the story of how one weapon, the M1 Garand, fundamentally broke the arithmetic of infantry combat and left the Wehrmacht scrambling for answers they would never find. The Germans entered World War II with arguably the finest infantry training in the world. Their tactical doctrine, refined through decades of Prussian military tradition, emphasized fire and maneuver, combined arms, and aggressive squad-level initiative. At the heart of this system sat the Kar 98K, a bolt-action rifle that represented the culmination of a design philosophy dating back to the Franco-Prussian War. But the Americans had spent the 1930s quietly preparing for a different kind of war. While European powers clung to bolt-action rifles, the British Lee Enfield, the Soviet Mosin-Nagant, even the German Kar 98K, the United States Army adopted the world's first semi-automatic rifle as standard infantry issue, the M1 Garand. General George Patton would call it the greatest battle implement ever devised. The Germans had a simpler description: unfair. To understand why this weapon created such havoc, we must first understand what infantry combat actually looked like in 1944. Firefights were brutal, close-range affairs decided in seconds. Suppressive fire, the ability to keep an enemy's head down while your forces maneuvered, determined who lived and who died. Volume of fire mattered more than individual marksmanship. The Kar 98K could deliver 5 aimed shots. Then the German soldier had to duck behind cover, fumble with a 5-round stripper clip, reload, and resume firing. In those precious seconds of silence, the enemy advanced. Or worse, the enemy never stopped firing at all. Every American rifleman carried an M1 Garand loaded with an 8-round en-bloc clip. Pull the trigger, the rifle fired. Pull again, it fired again. No bolt to manipulate. No rhythm to break. Just continuous, devastating fire until that 8th round ejected the clip with its famous ping. Even then, an experienced soldier could reload in under 3 seconds. The mathematics were brutal. A German infantry squad, 9 men with bolt-action rifles and 1 MG-42 machine gun, faced an American squad of 12 men, each carrying what amounted to a semi-automatic rifle capable of sustained fire. In a straight firefight, the Germans were outgunned 3-1 before the MG-42 even entered the equation. But numbers alone don't tell the story. The real revolution was psychological. The German army of 1944 was not the same force that had blitzkrieged across Poland and France. By the time American forces landed in Normandy, the Wehrmacht had been bled white on the Eastern Front. Entire divisions had been destroyed in the frozen hell of Stalingrad and the grinding attrition of Kursk. Replacements arriving in the West were younger, less trained, and increasingly demoralized. These soldiers had grown up in a military culture that emphasized the individual marksman. German training doctrine allocated significant time to marksmanship, teaching soldiers to make every shot count. The Kar 98K was an excellent rifle for this purpose. Accurate, reliable, powerful. In the hands of a skilled marksman at 400 meters, it was deadly. But close-quarters hedgerow combat in Normandy didn't happen at 400 meters. It happened at 50, sometimes 20. In the bocage, those ancient Norman hedgerows forming impenetrable walls of earth and vegetation, visibility dropped to mere yards. Battles erupted without warning when patrols stumbled into each other in the green maze. In these conditions, aimed fire became less important than fire volume. The Germans discovered this terrible truth repeatedly throughout June and July 1944. Unteroffizier Hans Weber commanded a squad in the 352nd Infantry Division. His men were veterans. They'd survived the Eastern Front, which in Wehrmacht terms meant they were both exceptionally skilled and deeply traumatized. Weber had trained his squad relentlessly on fire discipline and tactical movement. They knew their jobs. On June 12, 1944, Weber's squad occupied a strong defensive position overlooking a sunken road near St. Lo. The position offered excellent fields of fire, good cover, and a clear withdrawal route. By any tactical standard, they held the advantage. When the American patrol appeared in the road below, Weber's machine gunner opened fire first. The Americans scattered, diving for cover in the roadside ditches. Standard procedure. The MG-42 suppressed the enemy while riflemen maneuvered for flanking positions. Weber ordered his riflemen forward. They moved in textbook fashion, using cover and concealment, preparing to catch the Americans in a crossfire. 3 of his men reached their firing positions and began engaging targets. Then the Americans returned fire. All of them. Simultaneously. The volume was staggering. Weber later described it as being caught in a hailstorm of bullets. His men couldn't raise their heads to acquire targets. Every time they tried to work their bolts, bullets cracked past their positions. The suppressive fire was so intense that Weber's machine gunner couldn't maintain his rate of fire. He kept flinching from the incoming rounds. Within 30 seconds, 2 of Weber's riflemen were wounded. The squad began falling back without orders, self-preservation overriding training. The Americans advanced under their own covering fire, leapfrogging forward in perfect fire and maneuver technique. Weber's squad broke contact and retreated. They'd lost the engagement despite superior position, superior training, and the element of surprise. The after-action report noted cryptically, "Enemy possesses overwhelming firepower at squad level." This pattern repeated across Normandy. German commanders began receiving disturbing reports from their frontline units. American infantry squads were winning firefights they should have lost. Defensive positions that should have held were being overrun. The mathematics of combat had somehow changed. Oberstleutnant Fritz Ziegelmann, operations officer for the 352nd Division, studied the tactical reports with growing concern. His division was being eroded through hundreds of small unit engagements. The Americans weren't employing better tactics. In many cases, their tactical doctrine was textbook and predictable. But they were winning through sheer firepower. Ziegelmann identified the problem: the M1 Garand. His report to higher headquarters was blunt. Every American rifleman possessed the sustained fire capability of a German light machine gun. Traditional infantry tactics, based on fire superiority through crew-served weapons, no longer worked. The Americans achieved fire superiority at the individual soldier level. The German response was to increase the number of machine guns at squad level and emphasize even more aggressive tactics. But machine guns required ammunition bearers, limiting maneuver capability. And aggressive tactics against an enemy who never stopped shooting led to predictably horrific casualties. By mid-July, veteran German units began refusing direct assaults against American positions. Officers reported that their men showed extreme reluctance to close with American infantry, even when numerical superiority and tactical advantage suggested success. The psychological impact of continuous fire had shattered German confidence at the most basic level. Private Heinrich Bohl, later a famous German author, described his first encounter with American infantry in his wartime letters. "We could not believe what we were experiencing," he wrote. "Every American seemed to carry a machine gun. Our training meant nothing. Our tactics meant nothing. We could only die or retreat." The German army had spent generations perfecting infantry tactics around the capabilities and limitations of bolt-action rifles. Squad leaders calculated suppression time based on magazine capacity and reload speed. Maneuver elements timed their movements to enemy reload cycles. Fire and movement doctrine assumed rough parity in individual weapon capability. The M1 Garand invalidated all of it. The true test came during the breakout from Normandy in late July 1944. Operation Cobra, the American offensive designed to shatter German lines and break into the French interior, would prove whether the M1 Garand's tactical advantages could translate to operational success. The German defense relied on delaying tactics. Small groups of infantry, supported by machine guns and mortars, would occupy strong positions, inflict casualties, and withdraw before being overwhelmed. This defense-in-depth strategy had worked effectively on the Eastern Front, bleeding Soviet offensives white through cumulative attrition. Against the Americans, it failed catastrophically. The fundamental problem was timing. German defensive doctrine assumed that defenders could suppress attacking infantry during their approach, forcing attackers to take cover and coordinate their assault. This bought time to call for artillery support, time to reposition machine guns, time to organize withdrawal to the next defensive line. But American infantry didn't stop during the approach. They advanced under their own covering fire, each soldier capable of sustained suppression. German defenders found themselves suppressed by the very forces they were supposed to be suppressing. At the Wehr River crossing on July 28, a single American infantry company assaulted a fortified German position held by 2 Wehrmacht platoons. The German position was formidable. Concrete bunkers, interlocking fields of fire, pre-registered mortar concentrations. By conventional calculation, the Americans needed at least a 3-to-1 numerical advantage and significant artillery preparation. The American company commander chose a different approach. He organized his men into 3 assault groups, each built around a base of fire element. The base of fire didn't require machine guns. 20 M1 Garands provided more than adequate suppression. While one group fired, another advanced. The Germans couldn't return effective fire. The battle lasted 18 minutes. The American company suffered 12 casualties, none fatal. The German position was overrun, yielding 47 prisoners and 3 destroyed machine gun positions. The American commander's after-action report noted, "Enemy resistance collapsed under sustained rifle fire. Minimal artillery support required." This tactical revolution rippled through the American Army's operational planning. Battalion and regimental commanders discovered they could achieve fire superiority without concentrating heavy weapons. Infantry companies could operate more independently, knowing each rifle squad possessed formidable firepower. The traditional ratio of attackers to defenders began shifting in favor of the offense. For the Germans, the implications were devastating. Every defensive manual, every tactical training document, every officer's education was based on assumptions that no longer held true. They were fighting 1944's war with 1918's doctrine. General-Lieutenant Fritz Bayerlein commanded Panzer Lehr Division during the Normandy campaign. An experienced officer who'd served in North Africa and Russia, Bayerlein was no stranger to adversity. But the American breakout broke something in him. In his post-war memoirs, he described the psychological impact of the M1 Garand with remarkable candor. "Our soldiers were brave men," Bayerlein wrote. "They had fought in Poland, France, and Russia. They knew how to fight. But against the Americans, they felt helpless. The continuous fire, it never stopped. A man cannot think, cannot aim, cannot fight when bullets are constantly striking around him. Our best soldiers became paralyzed with fear, not from cowardice, but from the simple impossibility of their situation. The Battle of Mortain in August 1944 illustrated this paralysis perfectly. Hitler ordered a counteroffensive to cut off the American breakout, committing 4 panzer divisions and supporting infantry. German infantry were tasked with securing the flanks while armor drove through American positions. The infantry mission failed almost immediately. American defenders, occupying hastily prepared positions, generated such intense rifle fire that German infantry couldn't advance without prohibitive casualties. Attacks that should have succeeded through shock and surprise bogged down in the face of sustained semi-automatic fire. One particularly telling engagement occurred on Hill 317, where the American 2nd Battalion, 120th Infantry Regiment held against repeated German assaults. The American position wasn't particularly strong, shallow foxholes on a rocky hillside. But the battalion's M1 Garands created an impenetrable cone of fire. German assault troops described advancing into a wall of bullets. Over 6 days, the Germans launched multiple battalion strength attacks on Hill 317. Each failed. American casualties were moderate, 278 men out of 700. German casualties were catastrophic, estimated at over 2,000 killed and wounded. The mathematics spoke clearly. Semi-automatic rifles had fundamentally altered the casualty exchange ratio. German veterans later described the psychological burden of attacking American positions. Unlike Soviet positions, where brief pauses in fire allowed for movement, American fire was constant. The moment a German soldier raised his head to acquire a target, multiple American rifles engaged him. Aggressive tactics became suicidal. Defensive tactics became untenable. There was no good answer. Lieutenant Hans von Luck, commanding a Panzer Reconnaissance Battalion, witnessed his attached infantry refuse a direct order to assault an American roadblock. The men weren't cowards, they were veterans of the Eastern Front. But they'd learned through bitter experience that charging American rifles meant death. Von Luck was forced to use his armored vehicles to suppress the position, something that shouldn't have been necessary against mere infantry. The mechanical reliability of the M1 Garand compounded German problems. The Kar 98K was similarly reliable, but its bolt-action design meant that even minor damage could render it inoperable. A bent bolt, a damaged extractor, a crushed magazine spring, any of these failures reduced the rifle to a club. The M1 Garand's gas-operated system was more complex, but proved remarkably robust under combat conditions. American soldiers reported that their rifles continued functioning through mud, rain, dust, and rough handling. Even damaged Garands often continued firing, if less reliably. This reliability gap meant that as firefights extended, German firepower degraded while American firepower remained constant. In a 30-minute engagement, a German squad might lose 20% of its effective weapons through mechanical failure or minor damage. The American squad maintained full capability. The cumulative effect was a collapse in German infantry morale. By September 1944, German commanders reported widespread unwillingness among infantry to engage American forces at close quarters. Soldiers would hold defensive positions if ordered, but showed extreme reluctance to assault or counterattack. The weapon that had made the German infantry feared across Europe had become obsolete, and the men carrying it knew they were outgunned. The German army's response to the M1 Garand crisis revealed the depth of their technological and industrial disadvantage. Throughout late 1944, Wehrmacht ordnance departments explored options to restore infantry firepower parity. The most obvious solution, adopting a semi-automatic rifle, was examined and rejected. Germany did possess semi-automatic rifle designs, notably the Gewehr 41 and the later Gewehr 43. Both were capable weapons, roughly comparable to the M1 Garand in combat effectiveness. But Germany couldn't manufacture them in meaningful numbers. The Garand required significant industrial infrastructure to produce: precision machinery, quality steel, skilled labor, and consistent quality control. The United States produced over 4 million M1 Garands during the war. Germany managed approximately 425,000 Gür 43 rifles, most produced in late 1944 and 1945 when the war was already lost. The numbers told the story of industrial mismatch. By 1944, American factories were producing 30,000 M1 Garands per month. German production of all small arms struggled to replace combat losses. The technological gap couldn't be closed through manufacturing. Germany simply lacked the industrial capacity. German ordnance officers proposed alternative solutions. Increase machine gun allocation at squad level. Issue more submachine guns. Emphasize grenades and close assault tactics. None addressed the fundamental problem. In a firefight at 50 meters, German soldiers were outgunned by every American infantryman. The stopgap solution was the Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first assault rifle. Using an intermediate cartridge and capable of both semi-automatic and automatic fire, the STG-44 theoretically matched the M1 Garand's firepower while adding full automatic capability. It was a brilliant weapon, decades ahead of its time. Germany produced 425,000 of them. The United States had already distributed 4 million Garands. Even this technological leap came too late and in too few numbers to matter. The tactical impact of the M1 Garand extended beyond firefights. American operational tempo increased dramatically because infantry units could advance more aggressively. Battalion commanders discovered they needed less artillery preparation before assaults. Regimental operations that previously required a day of preparatory bombardment could be executed with minimal fire support because infantry squads generated their own suppression. This operational advantage compounded over time. American forces moved faster, hit harder, and recovered more quickly than German planners anticipated. The German defensive strategy of trading space for time failed because Americans didn't need as much time to prepare each attack. Statistical analysis from the European theater revealed the lethality gap. In sustained firefights between comparable-sized units, American casualties averaged 30 to 40% lower than German casualties. This wasn't due to better tactics or superior training. American infantry in 1944 were often green troops facing German veterans. The difference was firepower. More significantly, American units maintained combat effectiveness longer. A German squad reduced to 6 effective men had lost nearly half its rifle firepower. An American squad reduced to 6 men retained 75% of its firepower because each remaining soldier still carried a Garand. This meant American units could sustain combat operations longer before requiring relief or reinforcement. The psychological impact may have been more important than the tactical. German soldiers developed what would later be termed learned helplessness in combat against American forces. They knew before the firefight began that they were technologically inferior. This knowledge eroded initiative, aggressive tactics, and combat motivation. American soldiers, conversely, gained confidence from their weapon. They knew they could outshoot their opponents. This confidence translated to more aggressive tactics, faster decision-making, and better small unit leadership. The M1 Garand didn't just give Americans better firepower, it gave them better morale. By war's end, the casualty statistics were stark. In the European theater, American forces suffered approximately 586,000 casualties. German forces on the Western Front suffered an estimated 2.8 million casualties. While many factors contributed to this disparity, air superiority, artillery supremacy, logistical advantage, the M1 Garand's contribution to small unit combat effectiveness cannot be dismissed. The German army surrendered in May 1945, still predominantly armed with Kar 98K rifles designed in 1898. The technological gulf between bolt-action and semi-automatic had proven unbridgeable. 47 years of German military tradition, built around the capabilities of the bolt-action rifle, had been rendered obsolete in 4 years of combat. The M1 Garand's impact extended far beyond World War II. It fundamentally changed how military planners thought about infantry weapons and squad-level tactics. The concept that every rifleman should possess semi-automatic or automatic capability became the new standard for modern armies. Soviet observers in the European theater took careful notes on American firepower advantages. The post-war development of the AK-47 reflected lessons learned from watching M1 Garands in action. Mikhail Kalashnikov specifically cited the need for Soviet infantry to match American firepower as a design priority. The British Army, having resisted semi-automatic rifles throughout the war, began development of the EM-2 rifle in 1945. The French, Belgians, and other NATO armies followed suit. Within a decade of war's end, every major military power had adopted or was developing semi-automatic or automatic infantry rifles. The tactical doctrine developed around the M1 Garand became the foundation for modern infantry tactics. Fire and maneuver, with every soldier capable of providing suppressive fire, remains the cornerstone of small unit operations. The idea that riflemen are the base of squad firepower, rather than supporting elements for crew-served weapons, traces directly to American experience with the Garand. What's remarkable is how this revolution occurred largely unnoticed by the public. The M1 Garand never captured popular imagination the way the P-51 Mustang or M4 Sherman did. There are no famous photographs of soldiers posing with their Garands. No movies celebrate the rifle specifically. It simply did its job, quietly and effectively, while more dramatic weapons captured headlines. Military historians began appreciating the Garand's significance only decades after the war. Studies of combat effectiveness, casualty exchange ratios, and tactical evolution revealed the weapon's outsized impact. What seemed like marginal advantage, 8 rounds versus 5, semi-automatic versus bolt action, translated to revolutionary changes in how infantry fought. The German military archives, captured after the war, contained extensive analysis of American small arms superiority. Wehrmacht tactical reviews consistently identified the M1 Garand as a critical factor in combat effectiveness. German officers who'd fought on both Eastern and Western fronts noted that while Soviet infantry often had numerical superiority, American infantry had technological superiority that was far harder to overcome. One particularly insightful analysis came from General Feld Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, who commanded German forces in the West during critical periods. In post-war interrogations, he identified 3 factors that made American forces particularly formidable: air superiority, artillery fire control, and infantry weapons. He noted that while Germany might have matched American artillery through better tactics, and might have contested air superiority with more resources, the infantry weapons gap was impossible to address through any means available to us. The industrial dimension deserves emphasis. The M1 Garand succeeded not just because it was a superior weapon, but because American industry could produce it in overwhelming numbers. This combined technological and industrial superiority characterized the American way of war and proved decisive across every theater. The rifle's longevity speaks to its design excellence. While most World War II-era weapons were quickly retired, the M1 Garand remained in American service through the Korean War and into the early Vietnam era. It equipped Allied nations well into the 1960s. Some continue in ceremonial use today. Few weapons from the 1930s can claim such enduring relevance. The human experience of the M1 Garand reveals the weapon's true character. This wasn't a technological abstraction. It was a tool that men trusted with their lives. Private First Class Harold Keller carried his Garand through Normandy, across France, and into Germany. In letters home, He rarely mentioned the rifle specifically, but his description of combat invariably referenced his ability to keep firing. "I never felt helpless," he wrote. "Even when we were outnumbered, I knew I could make them keep their heads down long enough for us to get out." That confidence, the psychological edge of knowing you're better armed than your enemy, permeates American veteran accounts. Soldiers nicknamed their Garands. They personalized them with small modifications. They maintained them obsessively, knowing the rifle might mean the difference between survival and death. Sergeant Paul Rogers described teaching new replacements how to use the Garand effectively. "The most important thing was teaching them not to panic," he recalled. "With a bolt gun, if you miss your shot, you're vulnerable while you reload. With the Garand, you just keep firing. That changes everything. The enemy is worried about your fire, not you worried about their fire." The famous Garand ping, the distinctive sound of the en-bloc clip ejecting, became both a comfort and a concern. American soldiers grew so accustomed to the sound that its absence indicated something wrong. But the noise also told nearby enemies that a soldier was reloading, theoretically creating a window of vulnerability. In practice, this vulnerability rarely mattered. The 3-second reload time was faster than most soldiers could identify the source of the ping and move to exploit it. And in squad combat, multiple Garands meant continuous fire regardless of individual reload cycles. Technical Sergeant Michael Doherty described an engagement where his squad held off a German probe with just rifle fire. "We had no machine gun, our bar gunner was wounded," he remembered. "Just 8 of us with Garands. We put down so much fire the Germans must have thought we were a whole platoon. They pulled back after maybe 5 minutes. We couldn't have done that with Springfields." The comparison to the M1903 Springfield, America's previous standard rifle, appeared frequently in veteran accounts. Older soldiers who'd trained on Springfields described the Garand as transformative. "The Springfield was a great rifle," one veteran noted. "But it was a rifleman's rifle. The Garand was a soldier's rifle. You didn't need to be a marksman to be effective." German soldiers on the receiving end described the psychological pressure differently. Lancer, the German term for common infantryman, developed deep respect bordering on fear for American firepower. Captured German soldiers often expressed surprise at how few Americans had actually been shooting at them. The volume of fire created the illusion of facing far larger forces. This psychological warfare aspect wasn't planned or intended. It emerged naturally from the weapon's capabilities. American squads sounded like platoons. Platoons sounded like companies. The Germans couldn't accurately assess American strength through auditory cues alone, leading to overestimation and defensive thinking. First Lieutenant William Harrison commanded an infantry platoon in the 1st Infantry Division. His leadership style adapted to the Garand's capabilities. "I didn't need to mass firepower the way my father did in World War I, he explained. "I could split my platoon into multiple elements, knowing each element had enough firepower to handle itself. It changed how I thought about tactics entirely." The weapon even affected how Americans viewed themselves as soldiers. The democratic aspect of the Garand, every infantryman armed identically with a powerful weapon, reinforced American egalitarian values. Officers carried Garands alongside privates. There was no aristocratic distinction between officers with pistols and enlisted men with rifles. Everyone was a rifleman first. This contrasted sharply with European armies, where officers typically carried only pistols or carbines. The symbolic importance shouldn't be underestimated. American platoon leaders who personally carried Garands into combat shared their soldiers' risks and experiences in a way that created unit cohesion. The story of the M1 Garand and its dominance over German bolt-action rifles reveals something profound about military history. Technological advantage, when combined with industrial capacity and tactical adaptation, creates cascading effects that no amount of courage or skill can overcome. The German soldiers who faced American Garands in 1944 were not inferior fighters. Many were veterans of brutal campaigns in Russia where they'd faced and defeated larger Soviet forces. They possessed excellent training, strong unit cohesion, and decades of institutional military knowledge. None of it mattered when the basic tool of their trade was obsolete. This obsolescence happened quietly. There was no single dramatic moment when the Kar 98K became ineffective. Instead, through hundreds of small engagements across Normandy hedgerows and French farmland, German infantry learned they couldn't win firefights against American squads. The lesson accumulated through bitter experience until it became accepted wisdom: avoid close combat with American infantry. For the Americans, the lesson was equally clear but more encouraging. Aggressive tactics worked. Fire and movement succeeded. Squad-level initiative produced results. The M1 Garand gave ordinary American soldiers, many of them draftees with minimal training, the tools to outfight professional German infantry. The broader historical significance extends beyond World War II. The Garand demonstrated that individual soldier capability matters enormously in combat outcomes. Modern military emphasis on equipping every soldier with the best possible weapons traces back to lessons learned when American infantry, armed with superior rifles, consistently defeated their opponents despite facing veterans with better tactical training. The weapon also represented something quintessentially American. It was the product of one man's determination, John Garand's decades-long effort to perfect his design. It was manufactured through American industrial might. Millions of rifles produced while fighting a two-front global war. And it was employed with American pragmatism. Doctrine adapted to leverage the weapon's capabilities rather than forcing the weapon to fit existing doctrine. When we study the great campaigns of World War II, we often focus on the dramatic moments. The D-Day landings, the Battle of the Bulge, Market Garden. But wars are won or lost in thousands of small unit actions that never make headlines. In those small actions, the side with better tools usually prevails. The German army entered World War II with some of the finest military equipment of its era. The Kar 98K was an excellent rifle by any measure. But excellence measured against 1918 standards proved insufficient against innovation measured against 1936 standards. The 8-year technological gap might as well have been 80 years. Today, every military rifle issued by every modern army is either semi-automatic or fully automatic. The bolt-action rifle survives only in specialized sniper applications where precision matters more than rate of fire. The M1 Garand created this new standard. Its influence shaped every infantry weapon developed since. That influence extends to how we think about soldiers and their role in combat. The idea that ordinary citizens, properly equipped and trained, can outfight professional soldiers from militaristic societies is fundamentally American. The M1 Garand proved this idea in the most demanding test possible: actual combat against a formidable enemy. The men who carried Garands across Europe rarely spoke of their weapons with particular reverence. The rifle was simply their tool, as familiar as a carpenter's hammer or a farmer's plow. They trusted it to work when needed, and it did. That reliability, that quiet competence, may be the Garand's greatest legacy. In the end, the M1 Garand represents a truth about warfare that transcends any single conflict. Superior technology, properly employed, can overcome superior training and experience. Industrial capacity can trump military tradition. And sometimes, the most important weapon in a war is the one in every soldier's hands. The German infantry couldn't suppress American squads armed with M1 Garands because the fundamental arithmetic of combat had changed. Where German soldiers counted shots and calculated reload times, Americans simply kept firing. The mathematics of survival shifted decisively in favor of the side that could maintain fire when their opponents could not. This wasn't the war Germany expected to fight. It wasn't the war their doctrine prepared them for. And ultimately, it was a war they couldn't win, in part because every American infantryman carried a weapon that their enemy couldn't match and couldn't counter. The clicking of Kar 98K bolts, that rhythmic sound of German military tradition, fell silent before the continuous thunder of American semi-automatic fire. That silence echoes still, a reminder that in war, the side with better tools for their soldiers often writes the final chapter.